So if you want us to like you,
That's you're a terrible man, Joe.
Otherwise, we'll accuse you of murder. Yeah. We're also on Facebook. On Facebook, we're Thinking Sideways, of course, and we have a group, and we also have a page. Mm-hmm. So join the group. There's lots and lots of fun out there. We're on Twitter, or I should say the Twitter, where we are Thinking Sideways without that G. We have a subreddit also called Thinking Sideways, believe it or not. Lots of activity going on out there, at least I think. I don't know. Maybe I haven't checked it in a long time. What's going on?
With Reddit?
Yeah. Stuff?
Yep.
And things.
Okay. I'll get out there and check it. Of course, I say that every week, don't I? Yeah.
We leave that alone.
I will do that. Yeah, someday. And we have an email, believe it or not. There's this fancy new thing called email. So to reach us by this fancy new thing, it's thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. And then last of all, of course, there is Patreon. Whereas if you want to support the show, you can go out and go to patreon.com/thinkingsideways, and you can pledge a certain amount, 50 cents an episode, $1 an episode. Please be aware that the contribution is every time an episode runs, except for special shorts and things like that. We don't charge for those.
And thankfully, of course, you can set a limit for how much you want to spend a month. There's also the PayPal.
And we have a PayPal. And, of course, you can go when we're on our website. We have merch out there if you want to support us by buying merch. And you could have a really cool Thinking Sideways mug or a T-shirt, something like that. Other than that, that's about it. Do you guys have any last thoughts on this week's murder mystery?
No.
I don't.
Yeah, me neither. I think it's pretty open and shut. So that's about it. So, we'll see you all out there on the internet. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Everybody, a bit of a description here. This is almost like an underpass tunnel.
It is, yeah. It's an underpass
And
tunnel.
it's not, we have underpasses that we all drive through all the time, and there's maybe one or two pillars. There were, I think, on the order of 30 plus, maybe 40 pillars.
Yeah, it was under a large road.
And they were like every 10 or 15, 20 feet. So they were, it was a very long distance.
That's the thing about it.
And they were very closely spaced.
It's essentially on the outer walls. It's kind of like smooth tiled walls.
It's just stone.
And then the inner part, that separates the northbound and southbound lanes, or eastbound and westbound lanes, I guess, is all these columns.
Yeah.
And the tragic thing about this is that these deaths would have been very easily preventable if the city of Paris would just put a guardrail on either side of those posts.
This particular tunnel is the only tunnel that doesn't have them.
Yeah,
still doesn't. By the way,
every other tunnel does have that.
It still doesn't, and apparently a lot of people have died in that tunnel.
Yeah,
not just Princess Di.
Yeah. Anyways,
back to the story.
Sorry.
Yeah, so wow, we so easily distracted today.
Easy, yeah.
I mean, we got so much material to go over.
So the car hit one of the support beams. It was the 13th support beam, as I said, and it caused the car to spin like kind of backward. Kind of, it ran into it, and then the momentum of the back kind of kept going.
The tail spun around,
so
180.
So the car is now facing backwards, and it kept going and came to crash on the left side of the car up against the wall of the underpass tunnel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was the driver's side.
So Di and company not only had this big impact on the front that was deadly, but then they got flung around on the inside, and they're getting their heads beaten against all kinds of stuff.
And to try to visualize this a little bit for folks to put it into words and maybe help, because it was confusing. Every description I read made it confusing. Is if you're in the States, you're driving on the right-hand side of the road and you have a left-hand lane next to you, and those are both the same direction of travel. Car in the left-hand lane hits something and it does a 180. So this is, to me, is a very simple way to describe it. I mean, you hit the car in the left-hand lane, hits something head-on, does a 180-degree spin, and then continues to skid backwards so that it is now facing, was originally traffic moving in the same direction, is now oncoming traffic.
The impression I had actually was that it attempted to do a 360, but ran into the wall.
Yeah.
Right, and that's why I'm calling it a 180, because it spun because of that impact. It bounced from what was the left lane the left edge of the left lane to the right edge of the right lane.
And it's now facing the opposite direction.
Yes, and now it's facing the direction it came from.
Honestly, just look up pictures.
Yeah, one reason it spun is that it didn't hit dead on center.
No, it did not hit square.
It hit on the driver's side. And
that's the only reason the guy who survived is if that thing had hit square on, there would have been no survivors for any amount of time.
Well, there would have been if they'd all been wearing their seatbelts, possibly.
Based on the situation, none of them would have survived.
No.
Yeah.
But again, I've drawn us off track. I apologize.
Yeah. So the photographers, paparazzi, that had been following the car, they were a bit behind because they weren't driving as fast as Henri.
Because they couldn't.
They were pretty much all on motorcycles, right?
I think, yeah. But when they arrived, many of them ran to the crash to help victims. Some, who are truly just human garbage, did not, and decided that they would just take some pictures of the accident instead.
In defense of those guys, though, I mean, there's only so many people that can reach in there and take people's pulses and stuff like that, so you might as well be taking pictures, I guess.
I don't think I think that, that was one of the reasons that this was such a huge scandal, is because there was such a huge capitalization on a giant tragedy. If you're the first person on a scene like this, the fact that you're like, well, I can't help, so I may as well make a whole buttload of money, just makes me think that you are one of the worst kind of human beings. Yeah. Anyways.
But some of them actually did administer first aid.
Some of them did try to help.
They did try.
Both men on the left side of the car, which was driver Henri Paul, and then the rear passenger, Dodi Fayed, were dead. I think pretty much on impact.
On impact with the pole.
Yeah.
Or the column.
There's a whole list of their injuries, but it's safe to say they were super dead. Responders medical responders, did apparently try to resuscitate Dodi, but I think that was probably more for Diana's sake than anything else.
Why do you say that? Because I know Diana didn't die right away, but why was it for her sake?
Well, so one of the reasons that you would administer CPR, by and large, I don't know if people know this or not, but by and large, CPR does not successfully resuscitate people. Sometimes it happens,
very rarely,
but very rarely does it actually happen. 9 times out of 10, if a first responder is performing that, it's to calm the people who are bystanders or loved ones. So if you have a woman who is ostensibly in love with a guy, whether or not that's true, right, cares about this person, is probably in shock, massive shock, probably has huge injuries. The last thing you want her doing is also freaking the crap out.
Why are you not helping?
Yes.
Okay.
So
I see where you're heading.
That's my opinion. That's not something that people say around, but in my opinion, they would be more trying to do that just to kind of calm her down a little bit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I've read the research on how ineffective CPR is in most situations, because CPR is for getting the respiratory process going and getting the pulmonary process going. But most things that people fall down dead from are not that.
Yeah.
So that doesn't stimulate anything, because those aren't the causes.
Well, it doesn't restart. It just helps circulate until you can restart.
Correct.
So.
I got it. Okay.
Anyways, as Diana, as I said, was reported to have been kneeling in the back seat, and reports do differ. Either she was still in that position with her, back to the road, or sitting in the back seat with her head rested on the back of the front passenger seat. So depending on what position she had been in the crash. Most reports are that Diana had no serious outward injuries, which has been a big reason for a lot of conspiracy theories, especially the more sinister ones. She was conscious. She was rumored to have been murmuring, "Oh my God," and "leave me alone." One photographer who was trying to help said that she was sitting on the seat with her head rested on the front of the seat, with blood coming out of her nose and ears, and that her feet were stuck. That he had tried to help her out of the car,
her feet were stuck underneath the front seat.
Yeah. He said that he told her that help was on the way, and she just blinked and didn't say anything. And as a side note, there are photos of her after the accident.
I know.
Sitting in a car.
Some of those guys did take pictures, yeah.
There's one very iconic photo of people kind of standing around her, and she's just sitting there totally unaffected, totally fine. From a lot of stuff that I've read, and I'm inclined to believe it, that's actually a photo from earlier in the night when she was getting into the car.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh.
there was paparazzi around when they got in the car leaving the hotel.
Yeah, and if you kind of look closely at that picture, it doesn't look like the car's trashed really. And it's a super zoom in. There are photos that are probably her of, you can kind of just see the top of her head and like the car is super trashed, and I'm inclined to believe that that's her, but I don't think that one picture. I've read a couple things that said that's actually a picture from early in the night, and I'm definitely inclined to believe it.
I think you'd be able to tell because the
Yeah.
car. I mean, if you've seen pictures of the car, and I'm sure you guys have, it was destroyed.
Oh, and then they had
yeah.
to cut the top off with the jaws of life to get
Yeah.
people. Like, that
Yeah.
car was completely blitzed once they were done with it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
After the accident and after the recovery.
Oh yeah.
And the pictures that I do believe, it's after the jaws of life. You can see Diana's little blonde head sitting there in the seat.
Little blonde head.
I mean, that's what it is.
She had a little blonde head.
A little blonde head. But the one that is apparently that people say, you know, oh look, she's not injured at all. It's from earlier in the night. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. Yeah.
I'm on board with that.
Yeah. Trevor. Remember Trevor?
Yeah, Trevor
Yeah.
Reese
He was-
Jones.
Yep, the other guy.
He was conscious, but he sustained really serious facial injuries because the airbag had deployed. Again, no good reports on if he had a seatbelt or not. I don't think he probably did.
I've heard he was the only one who had a seatbelt.
I've heard that
That's what I've heard,
too,
too.
but I've also heard that he didn't have a seatbelt.
That's so.
It's hard to tell. I think what is important to note is he hit his head really hard, and I kept asking the question. I actually asked you guys this question just right before we started recording. I was like, yeah, there was a survivor. How come he can't tell us what happened? And it's like, oh yeah, he hit his head really hard. He probably lost his memories from hours, days, weeks before.
Yeah.
I have known people that have been in serious accidents, and they say they have no memory of it.
Yeah, no memory whatsoever.
I've been in car accidents where the
Yeah.
airbag went off, and I remember the airbag going off, but that's it. Like, I don't remember minutes prior or minutes after because it's just such a wallop to the noggin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was in a car accident recently, and I didn't even hit my head. And the minute
The
before
shock.
impact, I'm just like, I don't know what happened. I'm sorry, I don't know. Yeah. So let's talk about the timeline of emergency responders, real quick.
Yeah, this really sets some people up.
It sets me up a little bit. Some red flags here for me. The first emergency officials to arrive on the scene were 2 police officers, and they arrived around 12:30 a.m. 2 more officers arrived at 12:32 a.m. Dr. Jean-Marc Martino, a specialist in anesthetics and intensive care treatment, who was the doctor in charge of an ambulance, arrived around 12:40 a.m. The princess was removed from the car at 1 a.m. Jaws of life take a while. You want to safely remove somebody
Yeah.
from a car, make sure their neck is
You don't just open the
stabilized
door and yank them out.
No.
Well, some
No.
people do. And if the car's on fire, do that.
Yes, right. Otherwise, don't do that.
Don't move them. No, you'll get sued.
She went into cardiac arrest, and following external cardiopulmonary resuscitation, so CPR, she was resuscitated, I guess. She was moved to the ambulance at 1:18 a.m., and then the ambulance departed the crash scene at 1:41 a.m. and arrived at the hospital at 2. The journey was about a 30-minute long drive from the scene to the closest hospital.
Yeah.
Or not, I'm sorry, not the closest hospital. We should clarify, there was a hospital that was closer, but it was a very small
It was
hospital,
not
and
well set
the
up,
doctor
yeah.
in the ambulance decided, we're going to have to move her if we take her to this one. We may as well just take her straight to this other one that's way more equipped to deal with all of the injuries she's dealing with and not have to, get her kind of stable and then move her.
Well, and one thing I want to address is a lot of people freak out about this timeline. Why did it take so long to get her into the ambulance? Why did it take so long for the ambulance to leave? And what they don't think about is the fact that she went into cardiac arrest and they needed to stabilize her. And a moving vehicle is a vibrating object with it stops and starts which is going to have an impact on the health of somebody whose heart rate is unstable already.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons that they didn't just, as you see in the TV shows, flip the flashing lights and, gun on the gas pedal and rocket down the road. They couldn't do that.
Yeah.
It does make it a little more difficult.
It does.
Yeah.
It is, it seems like a long time. I think, half of me wants to say, that's a long, 20 minutes in between all those things, that's a long time. The other wants to say, no, that's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
So I'm on the fence on that one.
I side with the doctors and medical professionals in this one, because you don't just go bouncing people around who have just gone through all that.
And besides which, if these guys had really wanted to kill her by slow boating the whole process of getting her to the hospital, you don't really need to do that. Rush her to the hospital, which looks better, and then later on you smother her with a pillow. It's not hard.
Yeah.
Or rush her to the hospital knowing that that's going to make things worse. It's going to exacerbate the situation.
Yeah. So once she made it to the hospital, it was discovered that her injuries were just incredibly severe. Her heart had been displaced to the right side of her body.
That sounds kind of serious.
Yeah, which of course tore the pulmonary vein and also the heart of her wall. Surprise, surprise.
The wall of her heart?
The wall of her heart, not the heart of her wall. Whichever, Extensive attempts were made to resuscitate her, including internal heart massage, right? Which I think you can probably figure out what that is.
Somebody with their hand in his chest.
Yep.
So they cracked her open and gave it a squeeze or two.
Yep. But at 4 a.m., she was pronounced dead.
Yep.
At 2 p.m. the next day, Prince Charles and Diana's 2 older sisters arrived in Paris to collect her body and took it directly back to London. And this is another thing that kind of set some people off. She was actually embalmed before she was taken back to London.
Yep.
There was an autopsy done, although I don't think it was...
It's very cursory.
It was really cursory. I mean, when somebody's heart has been displaced to the other side of their body, I think people kind of say, that probably did it.
You probably don't need to go into great depth.
Yeah, why would you pull out every organ and weigh them and check them and run all this blood? Yeah. It's very obvious that what happened is everything from the left shifted to the right.
Yeah. And the other consideration, I think, and this is probably fair, is that they didn't think that her loved ones needed to see her in the state that she would have had to have been in had they done all that extensive stuff. They kind of just did the things they needed to do and sewed her up and got her cleaned up and sent her on her way, which I think is fair, but that does set a lot of people off, which I think is also fair.
Yeah, that raises alarms.
Both things, yeah. There's some weird stuff in the crash that we should go back and address real quick. One of those things is that there may have been, and probably was, and by probably was, I mean I'm 99.9% sure there was, another car involved. The French police issued a search warrant for a white Fiat Uno.
Which is...
It's like
basically,
it's a small hatchback.
It's a little dinky car,
yeah,
about a 1,500-pound car.
Yeah, they weigh nothing.
Yeah.
It's like the cheapest hatchback car in the world. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And apparently the way they figured it was a white Uno is they found further up the roadway where the Mercedes had been before it crashed. They found a broken taillight from an Uno.
Yeah.
And then found white paint
on
the side
Mercedes.
of the car, and they figured out he must have sideswiped a Fiat Uno.
Yeah.
And that maybe caused the accident, or certainly couldn't have helped things.
And let's be very clear here, despite some of the accusations that have been thrown around that we are going to say later in the show, this car has never been found and identified. The driver has never been identified.
Yeah.
Yes.
We do not know who was driving this car or why or what they were doing there.
And police did look at thousands of Unos.
They looked at thousands of them. Yeah. Another weird thing is a bit of reporting about the bends. Initially, it was reported that the car had been doing 120 miles an hour, which is 190 kilometers per hour.
Which is insanely fast.
Really, really fast. And that the speedometer had jammed in place when the impact first took place. Later, investigators corrected that and said, no, the car was doing like 60, 70 miles an hour, and that the speedometer was digital, so it couldn't have been jammed in place. But the manufacturer of the Mercedes-Benz actually said that the speedometer in this model, and this is corroborated by all of the literature about these cars, this make and model, is
which I've read through a lot of that.
Yeah, that the speedometer is actually computer-controlled analog, and though the car was certainly traveling faster than it should have been, the speedometer automatically resets to 0 when a crash occurs, which you would expect because it hit something and went to 0. So it's not moving anymore, so the speedometer is going to say, 0.
Yeah.
You're doing 0 miles an hour right now.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 120 miles an hour is a bit of an exaggeration, though.
I agree.
I'm sorry, but I've driven at those kind of speeds.
It's insane.
And it's on a flat piece of road, it's fine. I couldn't imagine trying to do that speed on a road that's got curves and humps and underpasses. Like, if you're doing that, that's insane. I mean, I've done it in short bits, but not anything